The night my mother-in-law locked me out of my own house, I realized I had already been erased from my marriage. It was raining in Cedar Falls, Iowa. The kind of cold rain that seeps through your coat and settles into your bones. I stood on the porch, holding a grocery bag that had torn at the bottom, oranges rolling against my shoes, while the lights inside the house stayed on. I could hear the television. I could smell dinner. I just couldn't get in. Before I tell you how this ended, pause here. If you've ever been dismissed, betrayed, or treated as disposable inside your own family, like this story, leave a comment and subscribe. What happened next didn't begin with screaming. It began with silence. My name is Hannah Miller. I was 31 years old, married for 7 years, and a full-time homemaker. That last part is important because it's the word they used to justify everything they took from me. My husband, Eric Miller, worked as a regional sales supervisor for an agricultural equipment distributor. His parents, Thomas Miller and Judith Miller, lived 10 minutes away and treated our house like an extension of theirs. They had keys, opinions, authority. I had none. When Eric and I married, I left my job as a veterinary clinic assistant because he was transferred to Iowa from Missouri. We agreed I would stay home temporarily, manage the household, handle meals, budgeting, appointments, and help his parents as they aged. Temporary turned into permanent, quietly, without discussion. I ran the house like a small operation. Monthly expenses tracked down to the dollar. Eric's commission checks logged. Property taxes paid on time. I refinanced our mortgage 2 years earlier at a lower rate after spending weeks on paperwork he never looked at. But to his parents, I was still just Hannah, the girl who didn't work. That night, the locked door wasn't an accident. Judith Miller opened it eventually. She didn't apologize. She didn't look surprised. "Oh," she said, glancing at the rain. "We thought you were staying out tonight." I stared at her. "Why would you think that?" She shrugged. "Eric didn't mention you coming back." Eric was sitting on the couch behind her, shoes off, beer in hand. He didn't get up. "What's going on?" I asked him. He didn't answer. Judith stepped aside so I could come in, then locked the door behind me again. Deliberately. Dinner was already on the table. 3 plates, none for me. That was the first humiliation. Quiet, almost polite. The second came when Eric finally spoke. "We need to talk," he said. "Mom thinks it's time we restructure things." Restructure. Another word that sounds harmless until it's used on you. "What things?" I asked. "Our finances," Judith said quickly. "It's not appropriate for a grown man to have accounts he doesn't directly manage." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" Thomas Miller entered from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "We're simplifying," he said. "Eric's income should be handled by family." I felt something tighten in my chest. "I handle our finances. You know that." Judith smiled thinly. "That's the problem." Eric finally looked at me. Not with anger, with something worse. Detachment. "I'm moving my paycheck," he said. "Mom set up a new account." My voice came out steady. "Without telling me?" He nodded. "It's easier this way." Easier for who? Wasn't said. I noticed then that my laptop was gone from the desk. The folder where I kept our mortgage documents was missing. Even my personal file with my social security card and marriage certificate was gone. "Where are my things?" I asked. Judith folded her arms. "We're holding on to them for now. You've been emotional lately." Emotional. Because I asked questions. That was the moment something shifted. Not anger. Awareness. This wasn't about finances. This was about control. Eric stood up. "I think you should stay with your sister for a few days." I didn't move. "You're asking me to leave my house." "It's not your house," Judith said. "Not on paper." I looked at Eric. "Is that true?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. His parents had added his name alone to the deed during the refinance. I'd signed documents without reading the fine print because I trusted him. Because I was busy making dinner, managing appointments, doing the invisible work that kept his life smooth. I was no longer welcome in the life I maintained. I picked up my phone and called my sister, Rachel Owens, from the kitchen. She answered immediately. "I need a place to stay," I said. "Tonight." She didn't ask why. When I walked out with a single overnight bag, Judith locked the door behind me again. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream. I drove through the rain and replayed every moment I'd been told I was lucky, grateful, taken care of. I realized something else, too. They thought I was trapped because I didn't earn a paycheck. They were wrong. Because what I didn't earn in salary, I earned in knowledge. And they had no idea how much I knew about the life they just took from me. I slept on my sister's couch that night, staring at the ceiling, calm in a way that scared me. Because once you see the truth clearly, panic disappears and action begins. I woke up on my sister Rachel Owen's couch before the alarm went off, staring at the slow rotation of the ceiling fan. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on University Avenue. It was the kind of quiet that usually feels safe. That morning, it felt temporary. Rachel found me sitting upright, already dressed. "You didn't sleep," she said, handing me a mug of coffee. "I did," I replied. "Just not the way I used to." She sat across from me, studying my face the way older sisters do when they know something is wrong, but don't want to scare you into shutting down. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "I need to understand something first." I asked to borrow her laptop. She slid it across the table without hesitation. By 7:18 a.m., I was logged into the shared email account Eric and I had used for household bills. Or at least, I tried to be. The password didn't work. I tried the backup recovery email. Also changed. That wasn't an accident. Eric barely remembered his own passwords. I moved to the bank website next. Our joint checking account still existed, but the balance was different. Lower. Transfers I didn't recognize dated 3 days earlier. Large ones. One to an account ending in 4412. Another to 7789. Both new. Rachel watched quietly as I pulled up our mortgage portal. The refinance documents were there. I opened the file I remembered signing late one night, half asleep, trusting that Eric had reviewed it like he said. He hadn't lied. He just omitted. My name wasn't on the deed anymore. I closed the laptop slowly. "They planned this," Rachel said. "Yes," I replied. "And they didn't rush." Eric had been distant for months. Not angry, just disengaged. Short answers. Long phone calls taken outside. Dinner eaten while scrolling. I chalked it up to work stress. Judith Miller had told me men withdraw when they feel pressured. What she hadn't said was who was doing the pressuring. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Eric. "We need to keep things calm. Mom says lawyers get involved when emotions spiral." I stared at the screen. He hadn't asked where I was, or if I was okay. He'd already framed the story. I typed back, "I'm calm. I'm just not confused anymore." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Rachel cleared her throat. "What's your plan?" "I don't have one yet," I said, "but I need information." I called the county recorder's office that afternoon. The clerk, a woman named Denise Carter, confirmed the deed change had been recorded 14 months earlier. "You signed a quitclaim," she said. "I didn't understand what it was," I replied. "That happens more than you'd think," she said gently. That night, Rachel made pasta. We ate at her small kitchen table, my plate untouched for a long time. "They think you're dependent," she said finally. "They think I'm disposable," I corrected. She didn't argue. The next morning, I drove back to the house. Not to go inside, to sit across the street. I watched Judith's car pull out of the driveway at 8:04 a.m. Eric left at 8:17, still wearing the jacket I bought him last Christmas. The house went quiet. I didn't move. At 9:30, I called the utility company. "I need copies of the last 2 years of statements," I said. I handled the account. They emailed them within minutes. Electric, water, gas, internet. Every account was in my name. I smiled for the first time in 2 days. Eric might have moved his paycheck. His parents might have grabbed paperwork. But the house still ran because I made it run. At noon, I called a lawyer. Her name was Melissa Grant, family law, Cedar Falls. She didn't interrupt as I explained. Not once. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "They isolated you financially," she said. "That matters." "They think I have no income," I said. "Do you?" she asked. "Not on paper," I said. "But I manage assets." She nodded. "Then you have leverage." She explained Iowa's marital property laws slowly, carefully. 7 years of marriage, shared contributions, non-monetary labor recognized, especially when it enabled income. They can't erase you because you stayed home, she said. What about the deed? I asked. It complicates things, she said, but it doesn't end them. She paused. Did you ever help with Eric's work? She asked. Yes, I said. All the time. How? She pressed. I thought about spreadsheets, client lists, commission tracking, the CRM system he hated, the quarterly summaries I prepared so he could look competent in meetings. I did more than help, I said. I ran his back office. Melissa's eyes sharpened slightly. Do you have proof? I did. At Rachel's house that night, I logged into my cloud storage. Years of files, sales tracking, expense breakdowns, email drafts Eric sent under his name. I hadn't hidden them. I hadn't needed to. At 11:42 p.m., Eric called. Mom says you're digging, he said. I'm organizing, I replied. This doesn't have to get ugly, he said. It already is, I said. You just thought I wouldn't notice. Silence. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, he said finally. I closed my eyes. You meant for it to happen. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since the door locked behind me, because now I understood the shape of the trap, and more importantly, I could see the exit. They thought taking money meant taking power. They forgot something basic. I knew where everything was, and once you know that, the house you're locked out of isn't the one that matters anymore. The first mistake they made was assuming I would rush. The second was assuming I would beg. I did neither. The morning after I slept through the night at Rachel Owen's house, I woke up with a list in my head. Not emotional, sequential. Names, dates, accounts, habits, weak points. I'd spent 7 years managing other people's needs. Turning that attention inward felt unfamiliar, but precise. Rachel watched me pack a small tote with folders she didn't recognize. You look like you're going to work, she said. In a way, I am, I replied. By 8:30 a.m., I was parked outside the public library in downtown Cedar Falls. Not because I needed books, because I needed quiet internet, printers, and anonymity. I logged into the cloud drive again. I wasn't searching randomly. I knew exactly where to look. Eric Miller hated details. He outsourced them to me, because I was better at that stuff. His words, said with pride when it made him look organized, with irritation when it made him feel exposed. Inside a folder labeled Q3 Sales Support were spreadsheets that told a story no one else saw. I tracked his commissions monthly, not just totals, percentages, adjustments, returns, chargebacks. I'd noticed patterns years ago, but never questioned them because questioning Eric was treated like criticism. There were discrepancies. Small at first. A few $100s here, a delayed adjustment there. Then, bigger ones. Commission advances paid early. Bonuses misclassified. Expenses reimbursed twice under different categories. I pulled up his employer's policy manual. Publicly available. Agricultural equipment distributors are meticulous about compliance. Eric had been skimming. Not enough to trigger alarms alone, enough to add up. Over 7 years, the total came to just under $43,000. My hands didn't shake. At noon, I stepped outside to call Melissa Grant. I found something, I said. How serious? She asked. Serious enough that his employer wouldn't like it, I replied. And serious enough that I can prove I didn't benefit. She was quiet for a moment. Hannah, she said carefully. This changes the leverage dynamic. I don't want to threaten him, I said. You don't have to, she replied. You just have to be prepared. That afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, it was Judith Miller. She didn't bother pretending to be kind. You've embarrassed us, she said. I haven't spoken to anyone, I replied. You're making Eric unstable, she snapped. He can't focus. That almost made me laugh. He locked me out of my house, I said. Did that focus him? She ignored that. You need to come back and apologize, she said. This is still fixable if you cooperate. Cooperate. The word tasted familiar. Give me my documents, I said, and access to the accounts. She scoffed. You're not in a position to make demands. I thought of the spreadsheets. Yes, I said calmly. I am. She hung up. That evening, Rachel and I sat on her back porch, watching the sun drop behind the trees. The air smelled like cut grass and rain. What happens if you push this? She asked. I don't push, I said. I document. Eric texted me that night. Mom says you're being unreasonable. I replied with a single sentence. I need copies of our tax returns from the last 7 years. He didn't respond. At 2:14 a.m., another message came through. Why? Because my name is on them. I typed back. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. I'll send them tomorrow. He didn't. Instead, I received an email from Thomas Miller the next morning. Subject: boundaries. The email was cold, legalistic. He warned me against contacting Eric's employer, against accessing confidential business materials, against escalating personal disputes. He ended with, "We expect you to resolve this privately." I forwarded it to Melissa. She called within 10 minutes. "They're scared," she said. "That email is posturing." "What do I do now?" I asked. "Nothing yet," she replied. "Let them move." And they did. 2 days later, Eric showed up at Rachel's house unannounced. He looked exhausted, unshaven, nervous. Rachel didn't invite him in. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Hannah," he said, "we need to talk." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "You took my paycheck," I said. "You took my access. You took my documents." "I was under pressure," he said. "My parents said." "You're 34, I interrupted. "Stop blaming them." He flinched. "They think you're trying to ruin me," he said. "I'm trying to understand what you did," I replied. "And why?" He rubbed his face. "I was scared you'd leave." I studied him. "So you made sure I couldn't stay," I said. Silence. "There's something else," he said quietly. I waited. "There's someone at work," he admitted. It didn't mean anything. The words landed without drama. "What's her name?" I asked. "Lauren," he said. "Lauren Hayes." "How long?" I asked. 6 months. 6 months. Long enough for the deed change. Long enough for the account transfers. Everything aligned. I nodded. "Thank you for telling me." He looked confused. "That's it?" "That's all I needed," I said. "Hannah," he said urgently, "if this gets out." "I'm not threatening you," I said. "I'm protecting myself." He reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Go," I said. He left without another word. That night, I updated my list. Eric Miller. Financial misconduct. Marital fraud. Infidelity. Judith Miller. Coercion. Withholding documents. Thomas Miller. Intimidation attempt. Lauren Hayes. Affair partner. No action. Yet. I closed the notebook. This wasn't revenge. This was preparation. They still believed I was reacting. They didn't see what I was building. And that was their final mistake. The day Eric Miller admitted the affair, the ground didn't crack open. Nothing dramatic happened. No shouting, no collapse. Instead, something steadied. Betrayal is only destabilizing when you're still hoping to be wrong. I wasn't. The next morning, I drove back to my house for the first time since Judith Miller locked me out. I didn't bring luggage. I didn't bring witnesses. I brought a locksmith's card and a folded copy of the utility statements with my name on every account. I parked across the street and waited. At 9:06 a.m., Judith's car pulled out of the driveway. Thomas Miller followed in his truck 3 minutes later. They always left separately. A habit. Control disguised as independence. I crossed the street and tried my key. It didn't work. That was expected. I called the locksmith. His name was Brian Keller. Mid-40s, calm voice, used to domestic situations that pretended to be simple. "I'm locked out of my residence," I said. "All utilities are in my name." He arrived in 12 minutes. He looked at the door, then at me. "Anyone inside?" "No," I said. "Ownership?" he asked. "Marital," I replied. 7 years. He nodded. "That's enough for entry." The lock turned easily. Judith had never upgraded it. She preferred the illusion of control over actual security. I stepped inside. The house smelled the same. Lemon cleaner, coffee, something baking. It felt smaller. I walked straight to the office where my desk used to be. The desk was gone, replaced with a filing cabinet and a printer I didn't recognize. I didn't touch anything yet. I took photos. Every room, every drawer, every item that had been moved or removed. Time-stamped. Methodical. In the bedroom, my clothes were gone. Half the closet empty. My jewelry box missing. Eric hadn't been subtle. He'd been efficient. At 9:42 a.m., my phone rang. Eric. I let it ring. At 9:45, A text.
Why are you there?
I typed back. Because I live here. 3 dots appeared. Stopped. Appeared again. Mom is on her way. I sat down on the edge of the bed and waited. Judith arrived exactly 13 minutes later. Her face hardened the moment she saw the open door. "You had no right," she said, stepping inside. "I have every right," I replied. "This is my marital residence." "You abandoned it," she snapped. "I was locked out," I said. She waved a hand dismissively. Eric needed space. "I needed access to my documents," I replied. She took a step closer. "You're escalating this." "No," I said. "I'm correcting it." She looked around, then back at me. "Where's Brian?" "Who?" I asked. She stiffened. "The locksmith." "I hired him," I said. "Like I hire everyone else who keeps this house functional." Her eyes flicked to the kitchen. "You should leave before Eric gets home," she said. "I'm waiting," I replied. "For what?" "For the truth," I said. "All of it." She laughed sharply. "You think you're in control?" I met her gaze. "I think you've mistaken access for authority." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then at me. "He's coming," she said, "and he's furious." I nodded. Good. Eric arrived at 10:21 a.m. He didn't yell. He didn't slam doors. He stood in the entryway and stared at me like I was something unfamiliar. "You can't just come back," he said. "I never left," I replied. I was removed. Judith jumped in. "Tell her, Eric. She's causing problems." He didn't look at her. "You went through my things," he said to me. "I documented them," I replied. "You removed marital property." "That's not how this works," he said. "It is in Iowa," I replied. Melissa Grant confirmed. Judith's mouth tightened. "You hired a lawyer," she said. "I hired protection," I replied. Eric rubbed his temples. "You're making this worse." "For you," I said. "Not for me." He looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means I know about the commission discrepancies," I said calmly. "And Lauren Hayes." Judith froze. "What?" she said. Eric's face drained of color. "That's private," he said. "So was my marriage," I replied. Judith rounded on him. "You said this was under control." "I said she wouldn't find out," he snapped. Silence settled like dust. I picked up my phone and opened a folder. Not to show them, just to remind myself it existed. "I'm not interested in humiliation," I said. "I'm interested in resolution." Eric swallowed. "What do you want?" I stood. "I want my name restored to the deed," I said. "Immediate access to all marital accounts, and written confirmation that you and your parents will cease interference." Judith scoffed. "That's outrageous." Eric didn't echo her. "And," I continued, "I want a separation agreement drafted by my attorney." Judith exploded. "You're throwing everything away." I looked at her. "You threw me out." She turned to Eric. "You're going to let her do this?" Eric didn't answer right away, because for the first time, the consequences were louder than his parent. "If you don't agree," I added evenly, "I will escalate. Not emotionally, legally, professionally." Eric's jaw tightened. "You'd destroy me." I shook my head. "You already did that. I'm just deciding how visible it becomes." Judith stared at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. Not as the quiet wife. Not as the dependent, as a risk. "I need time," Eric said. "You have 48 hours, I replied. Judith laughed bitterly. "You think you've won?" I picked up my overnight bag. "No," I said. "I think you've lost." I walked out before they could respond. That night, I stayed at Rachel's again. But it felt different. Not like refuge, like strategy. Because now, they knew something important. I wasn't asking to come back. I was deciding what stayed standing, and the next move would decide whether this ended quietly or publicly. The 48 hours Eric Miller asked for were not about thinking. They were about scrambling. I knew that because I'd lived alongside him long enough to recognize the pattern. When Eric felt cornered, he didn't reflect. He delegated. He called his parents. He looked for someone louder to stand in front of him. That night, my phone stayed silent. No messages, no apologies, just the absence of noise that usually meant plans were being made without me. By the next morning, Rachel Owens left for work early. I stayed behind, sitting at her kitchen table with my notebook open, updating timelines. Not feelings, facts. At 9:12 a.m., Melissa Grant called. "They haven't responded," I said. "They will," she replied. but not the way you expect. What does that mean? I asked. It means they'll try to shift the venue, she said. Social pressure, public framing, something that makes you look unreasonable. She was right. At 11:06 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Judith Miller. Church luncheon. Today, Eric will explain everything. You should be there. I stared at the screen. The Miller family attended Grace Covenant Fellowship every Sunday. Thomas Miller served on the finance committee. Judith chaired the women's auxiliary. The church wasn't just spiritual to them. It was leverage. They were going to make this communal. Rachel came home for lunch and found me putting on a neutral blouse. You're going, she said. Yes, I replied. Because they want witnesses. And you're okay with that? She asked. I've been invisible long enough, I said. I don't mind being seen. Grace Covenant's fellowship hall smelled like coffee and casseroles. Folding tables lined the walls. Familiar faces turned as I walked in. Some smiled cautiously. Others avoided eye contact. Judith spotted me immediately. She looked composed. Victorious, even. Hannah, she said, loud enough for nearby women to hear. I'm so glad you came. Eric stood beside her, pale, tense. Thomas Miller approached, extending his hand like this was a business meeting. We're concerned, he said. This situation has been misunderstood. I nodded. That happens when people don't have all the information. Judith's smile tightened. We thought it best to talk openly, she said. As a family. A few women lingered closer, curious. Eric cleared his throat. Hannah and I are working through some personal things. Like adultery? I asked quietly. The word landed hard. Silence rippled outward. Judith's eyes widened. That's inappropriate. So was locking me out of my house, I replied. Eric swallowed. This isn't the place. You chose the place, I said. Thomas stepped in. We don't need details. I do, said a woman behind him. Linda Harper, the pastor's wife. If someone's being mistreated. Judith laughed nervously. There's been stress. Hannah's been overwhelmed. I met Linda's gaze. I managed our household, finances, and Eric's sales support for 7 years. I was removed without notice and denied access to my own documents. Murmurs spread. Eric looked at me, panicked. Why are you doing this? Because you asked me to be here, I replied. Judith's voice sharpened. You're embarrassing us. No, I said evenly. I'm answering questions. Linda crossed her arms. Eric, is there someone else? He didn't answer fast enough. That was enough. Thomas tried to salvage it. This is private. Linda shook her head. Not when it's brought here. Judith's authority fractured in real time. The women she once directed now looked at her differently. Eric leaned toward me. Please stop. Then give me my documents back, I said, and restore access. He didn't respond. I took a step back. I've said what I needed to say. I left before it could turn theatrical. Outside, my phone buzzed. Eric, we'll talk tonight. We met at a neutral office Melissa had arranged. Conference room. Neutral walls. No parents. Eric arrived late. Alone. You didn't have to do that, he said. You didn't have to cheat, I replied. He flinched. They're furious. I'm sure, I said. He sat down heavily. Mom thinks you're trying to destroy the family. I'm trying to survive it, I said. He looked at the table. Lauren is pregnant. The words were flat, like he'd practiced them. I didn't react immediately. Not because it didn't hurt, because I'd already moved past the point where shock controlled me. When did you find out? I asked. 2 weeks ago, he said. Before he locked me out. Before he moved the money. Before he tried to erase me. Thank you for confirming timelines, I said. He looked up sharply. What? It matters, I said. Melissa entered then, carrying a folder. We're ready, she said. Eric stared at the paperwork. Separation terms, asset freeze request, temporary support order. This is aggressive, he said. This is measured, Melissa replied, given the circumstances. He rubbed his face. My parents won't agree. They don't have to, she said. They're not married to Hannah. Eric looked at me. What do you want? I want out, I said, with my dignity intact. He nodded slowly. If I sign this, you won't contact my employer? I won't threaten, I replied. I'll respond if asked. He closed his eyes. He signed. Not because he understood. Because for the first time, the consequences were louder than his parent. As we left, Melissa handed me a copy of the signed agreement. This isn't the end, she said quietly. They'll try something else. I know, I replied. That night, Judith Miller sent me a final message. You've chosen to burn bridges. I typed back one sentence. I chose to stop standing on them while you lit the match. I turned my phone off because the next phase wouldn't involve explanations. It would involve enforcement, and they were about to learn the difference. Enforcement doesn't announce itself. It arrives as mail, certified, tracked, unemotional. 3 days after Eric Miller signed the separation agreement, the first notice went out. Asset freeze, temporary spousal support, mutual non-interference clause. All standard, all legal. All things Eric had never thought would apply to him. Judith Miller thought otherwise. She called me at 7:06 a.m., voice sharp and breathless. You blindsided us, she said. Thomas is furious. I didn't blindside anyone, I replied. You just didn't think I could see. You're hurting your own future, she snapped. No man wants a woman who does this. I paused. Not because it hurt, because it clarified. I'm not auditioning, I said. She hung up. By noon, Melissa Grant forwarded me an email from Eric's employer. Not to me directly, to her office. A routine verification request related to income disclosure in the separation filing. Melissa called immediately. They're asking questions, she said. Not accusing, but they're reviewing. Good, I replied. Eric had underestimated one thing consistently. Paper trails don't care about family loyalty. That afternoon, Rachel Owens came home early. She found me at the dining table, laptop open, surrounded by folders. You're calm, she said. I'm focused, I replied. She sat down slowly. Judith called Mom. I didn't look up. What did she say? That you've lost your mind, Rachel said. That you're vindictive, that Eric was forced. I nodded. Did Mom believe her? Rachel hesitated. She asked what really happened. That was new. The narrative was slipping. At 4:32 p.m., Eric texted me. My boss wants to meet tomorrow. I stared at the message. About what? I typed. The numbers, he replied. They think there were reporting errors. I didn't respond, because this was no longer about me saying anything. It was about systems doing what they do when inconsistencies appear. That evening, Melissa and I met again. She laid out the next steps. Judith and Thomas will try to intervene, she said. They'll pressure Eric to fight the agreement, maybe claim coercion. Can they? I asked. They can try, she said, but it won't hold. Why? Because you didn't threaten, she said. You documented. The difference mattered. The next morning, Eric met with his employer. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. At 10:17 a.m., Melissa's phone rang. They've placed him on administrative leave, she said, pending internal review. I closed my eyes, not in relief, in recognition. This was the cost of shortcuts. By afternoon, Judith Miller was at my sister's house. Rachel called me while I was out getting groceries. She's here, she said, and she's not calm. I returned to find Judith pacing the living room, coat still on, purse clenched like a weapon. You did this, she said the moment she saw me. No, I replied. Eric did. She stepped closer. You think this makes you powerful? I think it makes me safe, I said. She laughed bitterly. You've ruined his career. He jeopardized it, I replied. You knew, she said. You knew about the numbers. Yes, I said. And I didn't use them until I had to protect myself. Her face twisted. You're cold. I met her eyes. I learned from watching you. That landed. She straightened, gathering herself. We'll fight this. You're welcome to, I said. But you're not a party to the marriage. Her lips thinned. You'll regret humiliating us. I tilted my head. I didn't humiliate you. I removed the cover. She left without another word. That night, Eric called. He sounded hollow. They're auditing everything, he said. 6 years back. I know, I replied. They asked about you, he said. About your role. And? I asked. I told them the truth, he said. That you handled the tracking. That I approved the numbers. I nodded. That was the right thing. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said quietly. I know, I replied. You meant to protect yourself. Silence. I don't know who I am without my parents, he admitted. That's something you'll have to learn, I said. We ended the call without resolution. The following week, the support payments began. On time, automatically. Eric moved into a short-term apartment. Judith stopped calling. Thomas Miller sent one email to Melissa's office, demanding mediation. Melissa declined. At the end of the week, I received a message from Lauren Hayes. I didn't expect that, she wrote. I didn't know about you. Not really. I'm sorry. I stared at the words. I typed back one sentence. I hope you make better choices than he did. That was all. On Sunday morning, I walked past my old house. Not to go in, just to see it. The curtains were open, the yard overgrown. The place looked less controlled already. I felt nothing. No loss, no longing. Because the house had never been mine. The work had been. And now, for the first time, I was keeping the results of it. They thought enforcement would break me. What it did was something else entirely. It proved that silence had never been my weakness. It had been my restraint. And once restraint is lifted, the system takes over. Quietly, relentlessly. Exactly as designed. The day Eric Miller's leave became public, the phone stopped ringing. Not because people didn't know, because they did. In a town like Cedar Falls, news doesn't travel loudly. It settles. It shows up in pauses, in averted eyes at the grocery store, in conversations that end when you walk into the room. Rachel Owens noticed it before I did. People are watching you differently, she said as we stood in line at the pharmacy. They always were, I replied. They just didn't expect me to move. That week, the audit expanded. Eric didn't tell me directly. He didn't have to. Melissa Grant forwarded the notice from his employer's legal department. Full internal compliance review, transaction sampling, interview requests. 6 years back, the same span of time I'd managed his tracking, corrected his math, and reminded him which numbers went where. They wanted to speak to me. Melissa handled the scheduling. Neutral location, no surprises. The interview room was small. 2 representatives from the company, 1 HR, 1 compliance. Both polite, both precise. They asked how Eric tracked commissions, who prepared summaries, who submitted adjustments. I answered calmly. I did, I said, under his approval. Did you ever question discrepancies? The compliance officer asked. Yes, I replied. He told me not to worry. Did you benefit? HR asked. No, I said. I had no access to his personal spending. They took notes, thanked me. That was it. No drama. Truth doesn't need embellishment. That afternoon, Melissa called. They're grateful, she said. Not because you helped them, because you didn't hide. That distinction mattered. The next move came from an unexpected direction. The church. Grace Covenant Fellowship sent an email announcing a temporary leave of absence for Thomas Miller from the Finance Committee. No explanation. Just a line about maintaining trust. Judith Miller stopped attending entirely. Rachel forwarded me a message from a mutual acquaintance. Judith says you turned everyone against her. I didn't respond. You can't argue with a mirror. By Friday, Eric texted me again. They're asking about Mom and Dad. I read the message once, then replied. I didn't involve them, which was true. But systems don't need invitations. That night, I sat alone in Rachel's living room, the house quiet except for the ticking of the clock. For the first time, I felt the weight of what was happening settle fully. Not guilt, finality. The life I'd built inside Eric's world was dismantling itself without me touching it again. Because once exposure begins, it doesn't ask permission to continue. Saturday morning, Melissa and I met to review the next phase of the separation. The support order is holding, she said. Given the pregnancy and his employment status, it's unlikely he'll contest further. Good, I said. There is one thing, she added. Judith attempted to file an affidavit. I looked up. On what grounds? Claiming undue influence, Melissa said. That you coerced Eric emotionally. I almost smiled. Did it go anywhere? I asked. No, she replied. It was dismissed within hours. Why? I asked. Because she has no standing, Melissa said. And because the record contradicts her. Judith Miller was used to being listened to. She wasn't used to being irrelevant. That afternoon, Eric came to pick up the last of his things from Rachel's garage. I didn't stay inside. I stood on the driveway. He looked thinner, smaller, his posture less certain. They're terminating me, he said. I nodded. I'm sorry. He studied my face. Are you? Yes, I said. Just not surprised. He swallowed. Lauren moved back to her parents' place. I didn't comment. I thought my parents would fix this, he said. They always did. They can't fix accountability, I replied. He nodded slowly. I see that now. He hesitated. Do you hate me? I considered the question honestly. No, I said. I outgrew you. That seemed to hurt, more than anger ever could. He loaded the last box into his car and paused. I never thought you'd fight back, he said. I didn't, I replied. I stood still. He drove away, without another word. The following week, the termination became official. Eric Miller was dismissed for violations of company policy. No charges, no public scandal. Just an internal record that would follow him quietly. Judith called Rachel's house once. Left a voicemail. You've destroyed this family. Rachel deleted it. At the end of the week, Melissa emailed me the finalized separation agreement. Signed, filed, enforceable. I stared at the document for a long time. 7 years, reduced to pages and clauses. And yet, I felt lighter. Not because I'd won, because I was no longer waiting. On Sunday morning, I took a walk alone through Pfeiffer Springs Park. The trees were turning. The air crisp. I passed families, couples, people moving forward in directions that had nothing to do with me. For the first time, that felt right. The revenge everyone imagines is dramatic, loud, satisfying in the moment. This wasn't that. This was erosion. Careful, unavoidable. I didn't take anything from them. I stopped holding it together. And once I did, the structure collapsed under its own weight. As I turned back toward my car, my phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. This is Thomas Miller. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, not with dread, with curiosity. Because when people who built power on intimidation ask to talk, it's never about conversation. It's about control slipping. And I was done giving it back. I didn't answer Thomas Miller's message right away, not because I was afraid of what he'd say, but because I understood why he was reaching out now. When people like Thomas ask for a conversation, it's not to listen. It's to recalibrate power, to see if the old levers still work. I waited until the next morning. If you want to communicate, you can go through my attorney, I wrote. His reply came within minutes. This doesn't need lawyers. That was how I knew. It absolutely did. Melissa Grant confirmed it when I forwarded the exchange. He's fishing, she said, either for information or influence. Which one? I asked. Both, she replied, and possibly something else. Something else turned out to be money. 2 days later, Melissa called me with a tone I'd learned to recognize as significant. Did you know Eric's parents took out a home equity loan on your house? She asked. I sat up straight. When? 18 months ago, she said. Before the deed change. Before the affair, most likely. The timeline tightened in my chest. They leveraged marital property, she continued, to fund something unrelated, a private investment Thomas made. Without my consent, I said. Yes, she replied, and without proper disclosure. What does that mean for me? I asked. It means the property isn't just marital, Melissa said. It's entangled. And illegal? I asked. Potentially, she said. At minimum, contestable. That afternoon, I agreed to meet Thomas Miller. Not alone, not unrecorded, in Melissa's office. Thomas arrived 10 minutes early, suit pressed, expression practiced. Hannah, he said, offering a tight smile. You look well. I am, I replied, sitting down. He didn't waste time. We need to resolve this quietly, he said. The house, the loan, the fallout. You should have thought about that before you used my marriage as collateral, I replied. He frowned. Eric approved it. He wasn't the only one on the marriage, I said. Thomas sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. We assumed you trusted us. I met his eyes. You assumed I wouldn't check. That landed. He leaned forward. The loan is in my name. The investment didn't perform as expected. I nodded. So you need liquidity, and you're in a position to help, he said. There it was. The ask. By doing what? I asked. By agreeing to sell the house, he said. Quickly. Off market. I didn't respond. Hannah, he added, softer now. You don't want this dragging out. I didn't start it, I said. But I will finish it. Melissa slid a document across the table. This is a notice of claim, she said, regarding unauthorized use of marital property. Thomas's jaw tightened. You're threatening us, he said. No, Melissa replied. We're asserting rights. Thomas turned to me. This will get ugly. I've already been locked out, erased, and blamed, I said. Ugly is familiar. He stood abruptly. You think you've won. I looked up at him calmly. I think you overextended. He left without shaking hands. 2 weeks later, the loan surfaced in discovery. The lender froze repayment terms pending clarification. Thomas's investment partners demanded explanations. One of them withdrew entirely. The house became a liability. Eric called me that night, voice shaking. They're going to lose everything, he said. They made that choice, I replied. I never knew about the loan, he said. I believe you, I said. That doesn't change the outcome. He exhaled sharply. They want me to ask you to reconsider. I closed my eyes briefly. I've been reconsidering for 7 years. What do you want? He asked. The same thing I've always wanted, I said. Fair separation, clean records, no more interference. They can't do that, he said. Then they can't move forward, I replied. The following week, Melissa filed a motion, not aggressive, precise. It requested court oversight of the property, full accounting of the loan, and protection against asset dissipation. The judge granted it without hesitation. That order changed everything. The house couldn't be sold. The loan couldn't be refinanced. Thomas couldn't maneuver. Judith Miller called Rachel again, sobbing this time. She says Hannah is punishing us, Rachel said after hanging up. I'm not punishing anyone, I replied. I'm opting out of being used. At the end of the month, Eric moved out of state. Temporary contract work. Starting over, quietly. Lauren Hayes disappeared from the picture entirely. Thomas stopped calling. Judith stopped pretending. And the house, once the symbol of my containment, sat in limbo. I visited it one last time with Melissa. Not to claim it, to document. This place was never about walls, I said, standing in the empty living room. It was about leverage. Melissa nodded. And you removed it. As we locked up, she turned to me. They'll try one last thing, she said. People always do when they realize control is gone. What kind of thing? I asked. The kind that forces a public line, she replied. That night, I received a letter. Not from Thomas, not from Judith, from a process server. Eric Miller had filed for divorce. No surprise there. But the filing included a request I hadn't anticipated. He was seeking spousal support from me. I read the page twice. Then I laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly, just once. Because the final move they had left was to flip the narrative completely. And in doing so, they had given me exactly what I needed. A courtroom, a record, and a chance to tell the whole story without interruption. I handed the document to Melissa. She read it carefully, then looked up at me. This, she said, is where it ends. I nodded. Because when someone who erased you asks the court to depend on you, the truth doesn't just come out. It gets entered into evidence. The request for spousal support would have been absurd if it hadn't been so revealing. Eric Miller wasn't asking because he needed help. He was asking because someone had told him to. The language in the filing wasn't his. It was too clean, too strategic. It read like an attempt to flip dependency into leverage, to turn the narrative one last time, from abandoned wife to opportunist. Melissa Grant read it aloud in her office, her tone neutral. He's claiming you have superior earning potential, she said, based on your role managing finances and operational support. So now my unpaid labor counts, I said. She gave a small, grim smile. Only when it benefits them. The hearing was set for mid-November. Blackhawk County Courthouse, Family Division, no jury, just a judge and a record. I didn't dread it. I welcomed it. Because this time, I wouldn't be explaining myself in kitchens or church halls. I wouldn't be interrupted or reframed. I would answer questions, on the record, with exhibits. Preparation was meticulous. Melissa and I assembled a timeline that began the year Eric was promoted and ended the night Judith locked me out. We documented everything: utility bills, mortgage statements, the refinance, the deed change, the loan, the audit, the termination. We included emails Eric had sent, thanking me for keeping things straight and saving him again. Messages where he admitted he didn't understand his own compensation structure. None of it was dramatic. All of it was damning. The morning of the hearing, I wore a navy dress Rachel had helped me pick out. Not expensive, not severe, just appropriate. I wanted to look like myself, not a symbol. Eric arrived with a new attorney. Younger, less confident. Judith and Thomas Miller were not present. That spoke louder than anything. The judge, a woman in her late 50s named Patricia Larkin, reviewed the filings carefully before looking up. "Mr. Miller," she said, "you're requesting support from your spouse. Please explain." Eric cleared his throat. "My employment was terminated. I'm between positions." "And the circumstances of that termination?" the judge asked. His attorney intervened. "That's not relevant to support eligibility." Judge Larkin raised an eyebrow. "It is when income fluctuation is self-inflicted." Melissa stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to introduce evidence regarding the cause of Mr. Miller's termination and the financial dynamics of the marriage." "Proceed," Judge Larkin said. What followed wasn't an argument. It was a demonstration. Melissa walked through the documents calmly. The judge asked questions. I answered. Eric avoided my eyes. When the loan surfaced, Judge Larkin paused. "Mr. Miller," she said, "were you aware your parents leveraged marital property without your spouse's consent?" Eric hesitated. I didn't understand the details. "That seems to be a pattern," she said. By the time we reached the audit findings, the room had shifted. Eric's attorney whispered urgently to him. He shook his head. When Melissa finished, Judge Larkin leaned back. "Mrs. Miller," she said to me, "you were a homemaker?" "Yes," I replied. "And did you manage the household and support your husband's work?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Exclusively." She nodded. "Do you currently earn income?" "No," I replied. "I am rebuilding after being removed from my home and denied access to marital resources." Judge Larkin turned back to Eric. "You're asking this court to order support from a spouse you financially isolated, whose unpaid labor enabled your income, and whose exclusion coincided with your affair and financial misconduct," she said. "Is that accurate?" Eric's voice was barely audible. "That's not how I see it." Judge Larkin's tone cooled. "The court doesn't operate on how you see it," she said. "It operates on facts." She denied the request for spousal support immediately, without recess. Then she did something unexpected. She addressed Eric directly. "I strongly advise you to reconsider your approach to this proceeding," she said, "because continuing to reframe responsibility as victimhood will not serve you." The gavel came down. That was it. Outside the courtroom, Eric tried to speak to me. "Hannah," he said, voice strained. "I didn't think it would go like that." I stopped and faced him. "It went exactly like it should have," I said. He looked lost. Smaller than I remembered. "I don't know what to do now," he said. I nodded. "Neither did I when you locked me out." He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. Melissa squeezed my shoulder. "You were clear," she said. "That's rare." As we walked down the courthouse steps, the air felt sharp and clean. Winter was coming. The trees bare, the town quiet. For the first time since the door locked behind me, there was nothing pending. No waiting, no reacting. The system had spoken, and it had done something better than punish. It had corrected. That night, Rachel and I had dinner together. Simple, soup and bread. She raised her glass. "To you," she said, "for not folding." I smiled. For not disappearing. As I went to bed, my phone buzzed with one final message from Eric. "I see it now." Too late, but I see it. I didn't reply, because clarity doesn't need an audience. And closure doesn't require participation from the person who caused the damage. There was one chapter left, not in court, but in what came after. And that was the part that would define who I became next. After the hearing, people expected something to happen. An outburst. A victory lap. Some visible shift that proved the story was over. Nothing did. That's how I knew it actually was. Life didn't reset. It reorganized. The first change was practical. With the temporary support order in place and the property under court supervision, Melissa helped me access funds that had been frozen out of reach for months. Not a windfall. Just enough to stand on my own, without borrowing patience from anyone else. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Cedar Falls. 3rd floor. No balcony. Quiet neighbors. The kind of place no one would ever describe as impressive. It was perfect. I bought a used dining table from a woman named Carol Jensen, who was downsizing after her husband died. She insisted on delivering it herself. We drank tea in my empty living room while she told me about learning to live alone again at 68. "You don't need to rush," she said. "Just decide who you are without asking permission." That sentence stayed with me. I updated my resume for the first time in 8 years. Not apologetically, not defensively, honestly. Operations management, financial tracking, scheduling, vendor coordination, compliance documentation, crisis handling. The work I'd done hadn't been invisible. It had just been unpaid. Within 2 weeks, I had interviews. Within 4, an offer. Office manager for a mid-sized manufacturing firm in Waterloo. 48 employees. Family-owned, but professionally run. The owner, Daniel Ruiz, didn't ask why I'd stayed home. He asked how I handled pressure. I told him the truth. "I manage systems," I said, "even when the people inside them fall apart." He nodded once. "When can you start?" The second change was social. Judith Miller stopped being mentioned. Not whispered, not defended, just absent. Thomas Miller resigned from his remaining advisory role at Grace Covenant, officially for health reasons, unofficially because no one trusted his judgment anymore. Eric stayed out of state. Short contracts, temporary housing, no announcements. Rachel told me our mother had asked how I was doing. Not through Judith, directly. I didn't read into it. I answered honestly. "I'm building something stable," I said. That was enough. The house sold in January under court supervision. Not at the price Thomas wanted. Not quickly. The proceeds covered the loan, legal fees, and left what remained to be divided. I didn't fight for more. I fought for clean separation. The final divorce decree came through in February. No drama, no ceremony. Just a stamped document that ended 7 years of containment. I signed it alone at my kitchen counter. I didn't cry because I wasn't losing anything. I was reclaiming time. One evening, after a long day at work, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address. Inside was a letter from Judith. It wasn't long. "I don't understand how this happened. I thought control was protection. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say that." I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not to respond, to remember. Some apologies aren't invitations. They're acknowledgments. Spring came early that year. The snow melted fast. The river rose and settled. On a Sunday morning, I walked past my old house. Someone new lived there. Wind chimes on the porch, different curtains. It looked lighter. I didn't stop, because I no longer measured my life by what I survived. I measured it by what no longer followed me home. That was the quietest revenge of all. Not proving them wrong, but proving myself free. And as I turned the corner, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel Ruiz. "We're expanding. I want you to lead the transition." I smiled. Not because of the title, because for the first time, the work I did belonged to me. And that was the ending they never planned for. There were no doors left to lock, only paths forward, on my terms. The promotion didn't feel like a win. It felt like responsibility. Daniel Ruiz didn't announce it with a meeting or a congratulatory email. He called me into his office late one afternoon, the kind of hour when people stop performing and start telling the truth. "We're opening a second facility," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Same state, different county, new risks." I opened the folder. Timelines, vendor contracts, staffing projections, regulatory checklists. "You know how to do this," he continued. "But more importantly, you know how to say no when something isn't right." I looked up. "That's the job?" "That's the job," he said. I accepted without asking for a title change. He added one anyway. Operations lead. The workdays grew longer, the nights quieter. I learned the rhythm of a life where effort resulted in stability instead of suspicion, where questions were treated as competence, not threat. And still, echoes lingered. Not from Eric, from myself. I caught it one morning when Daniel asked me to challenge a vendor's timeline, and I hesitated. Just for a second. An old reflex, shaped by years of smoothing things over. I caught it, corrected it. "No," I said. "That doesn't work." The vendor adjusted. No fallout. That was when I understood how deep the conditioning had gone. I hadn't just been removed from a house. I'd been trained to disappear. Unlearning, that took time. The call from my mother came in March. Early evening. Calm voice. No intermediaries. "Hannah," she said, "I heard you're working again." "I am," I replied. "I'm glad," she said. "You sound steady." "I feel steady," I said. She paused. "Your father asked about you." I waited. "He said he should have spoken up," she continued. "Years ago." "That's his to sit with," I replied. "Yes," she said. "It is." We talked for 10 minutes. About work, about the weather, about nothing that required resolution. When we hung up, I realized something important. I didn't need them to understand. I needed them to stop rewriting. That was happening now. At the end of March, Melissa Grant sent me a final note. "All matters closed," she wrote. "You're officially done." I thanked her, sent a card, put the files away. I didn't shred them. I archived them. There's a difference. April brought one last surprise, an email from Lauren Hayes. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit in my inbox for a day, noticing the way my body reacted less than it would have months earlier. When I did read it, it was simple. "I'm having the baby in June. I'm not with Eric. I wanted you to know I won't involve you in anything. I'm sorry for my part." I stared at the screen. I believed her. I didn't respond, not out of anger. Out of clarity. Some chapters close without conversation. At work, the expansion progressed smoothly. Fewer fires than expected, better systems than planned. When something went wrong, we fixed it and moved on. No drama, no guilt, just work. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by my desk. "You ever think about consulting?" he asked. "Why?" I replied. "You see patterns most people miss," he said. "Companies pay for that." I considered it. Not as escape, as option. That was new. In May, I signed the lease on my apartment for another year. The landlord offered a discount. I accepted. Stability isn't flashy. It's quiet and cumulative. I hosted Rachel for dinner one Friday. We cooked together. No rushing. No obligations. She watched me move around the kitchen and smiled. "You're different," she said. "I hope so," I replied. "Not hardened," she clarified. Defined. That word, fit. Defined means edges, boundaries, the ability to say yes without disappearing and no without apologizing. The last message from Eric came in late May. I almost missed it. "I'm starting therapy. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what I lost." I read it once, then archived it. Understanding after damage isn't repair. It's record, and records belong in the past. That night, I took a walk through my neighborhood. Kids on bikes, porch lights coming on. Ordinary life unfolding without me at the center of anyone else's expectations. I thought about the night I stood in the rain, locked out of a house I maintained, holding groceries meant for people who had already decided I didn't belong. I remembered the stillness that followed, not the pain, the clarity. That clarity had become a compass. It didn't point backward, it pointed inward. The person I was becoming didn't need revenge to feel whole. She needed agency. And she had it. There was one chapter left, not about them, about what comes next when survival turns into choice. And that was the part I was finally ready to write. The first time I realized I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore, it startled me. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee brewing, sunlight cutting across the counter just right. My phone buzzed with a notification, and my body didn't tense. I didn't brace. I didn't rehearse responses in my head. I simply checked the message. It was from Daniel Ruiz, reminding me about a site visit later that afternoon. Nothing urgent, nothing loaded. That was when I understood the crisis was truly over. Not because everyone had apologized, not because things were fair in the end, but because my nervous system had stopped expecting impact. Work settled into a rhythm that felt earned. The new facility opened on schedule. No shortcuts, no last-minute heroics. Systems in place, people trained. Problems handled before they turned into emergencies. During the opening walkthrough, Daniel gestured toward the floor, the staff, the clean lines of the operation. "This is what calm leadership looks like," he said. I didn't correct him. I used to think leadership meant being loud enough to be heard. Now I knew it meant being clear enough to be trusted. In June, Lauren Hayes had her baby. I heard through someone else. A healthy boy. Eric wasn't listed on the birth announcement. I felt nothing sharp, just distance. People assume closure is a conversation, a final confrontation, a perfect sentence that lands and resolves everything. Closure is quieter than that. Closure is when a name stops triggering a reaction. Closure is when your story no longer depends on their awareness. Rachel and I took a weekend trip in July. Nothing extravagant, just a small cabin near Clear Lake. No agenda, no phones for long stretches of the day. One night, sitting by the water, she asked, "Do you ever miss him?" I thought carefully before answering. "I miss who I was before I learned to make myself small," I said. "But I don't miss him." She nodded. That makes sense. It did. By late summer, my consulting idea became more than a thought. Daniel introduced me to 2 other business owners, quietly, without fanfare. One conversation led to another. Not promises, interest, options. That word still felt unfamiliar. I didn't rush it. Rushing was an old habit. In August, my mother sent me a birthday card. No guilt, no commentary, just a simple note telling me she was proud of the way I handled everything. I didn't analyze it. I accepted it. Healing doesn't always mean rebuilding relationships. Sometimes it means allowing them to exist without power over you. I never heard from Judith Miller again. Thomas Miller's name came up once in passing. Someone mentioned he'd moved closer to family in another state. No tone, no judgment, just information. That was enough. One evening, I unpacked the last box I'd been avoiding. Old paperwork, mementos, things I'd carried without needing anymore. At the bottom was the spare house key Eric had once asked me to keep safe. I held it for a long moment. Then I dropped it into the trash. No ceremony, no anger, just recognition that it no longer belonged anywhere in my life. The woman I was at 31 believed endurance was love. The woman I am now understands something sharper. Endurance without respect is erosion. Respect without fear is freedom. On a Sunday afternoon, I walked through the park where I used to push down my thoughts so no one else would be uncomfortable. Families passed. Couples laughed. Someone played music badly on a guitar. Life, uncurated. I sat on a bench and watched it happen. I thought about the night I was locked out, about the silence that followed, about the slow, deliberate choice to stop begging for access to a life that never made room for me. That wasn't the beginning of my revenge. It was the end of my compliance. The revenge was never loud. It was living, visibly, legally, independently. It was refusing to be erased quietly. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in it, if you've ever been underestimated, controlled, or pushed aside by people who benefited from your silence, know this. You don't have to explode to reclaim yourself. You don't have to convince them. You don't even have to be believed. You only have to stop cooperating with your own erasure. That choice changes everything. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and share what part hit closest to home. Someone else listening might need to hear they're not alone. And if you want more real-life family drama stories about betrayal, karma, and quiet revenge, like the video and subscribe. Because sometimes the strongest ending isn't the one where they fall. It's the one where you walk away whole.